or it was, because Albon has just driven around the side of his good friend.
Thompson with the giveaway. Here's a chance in front. Oh, what a goal by Taze Thompson! TNT blows it up.
Or Quinn.
Or Petarka.
I think they perform better. You know, just they have better chemistry. They move on the ice better. They pass better.
But it's adding.
It's just
on
going
to,
into the whole.
Yeah,
Grand
it's
Prix.
adding on to the drivers' championship and the constructors' championship.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Volz alongside my co-host Riker Smith, and welcome to Sports Hour here on WNYF. Tonight we're going to be talking about this week's upcoming action around the NFL, as well as a recap of last week's game. So, Riker, we're going to start with the game that is already in progress right now between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants.
Yeah, man, it sounds like the Giants are taking a lead right now, 3-0. So we could see a little bit of a momentum shift over to Dallas somewhat soon within the game, but I honestly think that the Giants are going to pull away with this one. I don't know what you think. I think it'll be a lot closer of a game than we think.
Yeah, Riker, this is a game really that from a Cowboys perspective, you're coming off of some really bad performances. I mean, they had a game last week that despite a great effort in the fourth quarter, nearly coming back and beating the Baltimore Ravens, you're coming off of two pretty bad home losses for the Cowboys. Now you're going on the road for a game against the Giants, against $40 million quarterback Daniel Jones. It's early in the season, but you have to feel like this is kind of a must-win game for Dallas.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So let's move it into the next game. The Vikings at the Packers. So the Vikings are on a hot streak right now. They're 3-0. So we have, Sam Darnold playing absolutely out of his mind right now. He is playing way better than anybody really expected. Jordan Addison should also be back this week. So that's really good for the Vikings because they have Justin Jefferson alongside Jordan Addison. On the side of Green Bay is still out of Jordan Love at the moment. He was limited at practice today, so there is some promise there, but we should see Malik Willis back in the starting spot this weekend. And he played great last week. They're coming off a win, so hopefully Jordan Love is back, but for now Malik Willis is going to have to do the job.
Yeah, and Riker, it's always an interesting battle. Whenever Green Bay plays host to a division rival, it seems like there may be no better home field advantage in the NFL than there is at Lambeau Field. The Vikings are off to an excellent start. Sam Darnold is executing at a very high level. This is a team that's 3-0. But it feels like every year you get into some teams that get off to these hot starts and then sort of trail off near the end. I can think of teams that have gone even 5-0 or maybe 6-0 in the first few games of the season in the past, and then they end up trailing off and not even making the playoffs. Not that Minnesota is definitely going to be one of those teams, because this is a team with talent. They have Justin Jefferson. They have some other elements of their team. You said Jordan Addison's going to be back this week. The Vikings are a good football team. They're off to a 3-0 start. Who would have thought that Minnesota would have been this good? But certainly, even without Jordan Love, that's a really tough test going into Lambeau Field on Sunday.
Absolutely, and they're really showing how good of a team they are. So hopefully they can keep it up this week. Let's move into the Broncos at the Jets. This is at MetLife. Denver has been showing a ton of promise last week by beating the Bucs. So we weren't expecting that. That was a major upset. And I think they played in Tampa, I believe.
Yes, the game was in Tampa, yep.
So if Bo Nix has some QB potential, they're going to stick with him this week. I think personally that if he doesn't perform how he was last week, that he might be cut from the starter. I think that Zach Wilson is going to come in and he's going to start playing next week. Hopefully Bo Nix keeps up the good work, but right now he's kind of middle-of-the-line quarterback. I'm not really sure what we're going to see from him this week.
And that's the thing with Bo Nix, too, is that Bo is a 24-year-old rookie. He's a lot older than the usual rookie quarterbacks that you would expect in the NFL. And this is a Denver team that obviously the situation that they've had the last few years with Russell Wilson has been nothing short of an absolute mess. They're kind of hoping that they can put all their eggs in the Bo Nix basket. And Bo is a quarterback that has proven that he can be successful at the top level. We saw him in college football for both the Auburn Tigers and the Oregon Ducks. He was a good quarterback. He had a rough situation at Auburn that forced him to go to Oregon. Now he's maybe a little bit found himself back in that in Denver, as there's a lot of uncertainty around whether or not Sean Payton can be an effective head coach for this team. Again, it was a disaster last year. But the Broncos definitely have the potential. I think they have some talent on the roster. They have the potential to maybe get a few wins out of this season. And then when you look at the Jets, Riker, I think this is a team that they've sort of put their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket. And as good as Aaron Rodgers is, you also have to keep in mind, Rodgers is 41 years old, coming off of a major Achilles injury. So you can't really put all of your hopes into that. Now, the Jets do have some other good things going for them. They have an excellent defense, and Breece Hall is one heck of a running back. But, at least in my perspective, I don't know that the Jets are going to be able to sustain success. Rodgers has looked decent through the first few games of the season. You got to remember, he's on the wrong side of not only 30, but 40 as well. Not to mention coming off of a major injury, so that could be some signs for some concern for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned, Riker, that you potentially could see an upset in play in this game.
I think so. I really do. I think that Bo Nix is going to come out hot. He's going to come out swinging, and the Broncos are going to play very well this week. I think it's going to be a really close game. They don't win by more than 3 points, but I think they go into MetLife and take the win this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a valid point. We'll move on to our next game, an NFC South battle between the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. And Riker, this is a battle between two teams that maybe the Saints a little bit better than what we expected from them, and the Falcons maybe on par or not quite to where they thought they were, but it's been great for the Saints so far this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Derek Carr has been playing out of his mind recently. Week 1 and 2, that same deep pass to Rashid Shaheed, that was just amazing. He is playing so well. And if we can see, Rashid Shaheed did not have any catches or anything last week. He had a couple of targets, but no official catches or yards or anything. So if we can see him get more action this week, I really do think that that the Saints can pull away with this one. However, the Falcons are coming off a tough loss against the Chiefs on a play that was pretty controversial in the end zone. I forget what defender it was, but on the Chiefs, he actually, in my opinion, I feel like it was pass interference. He was all up in his face. It was pretty rough to watch the Falcons lose that game. But they did beat the Eagles the week before. So they have that going for them. If they can keep it close with two teams that were in the Super Bowl against each other 2 years ago, then they can absolutely keep up the pace moving into this game. I think it's been a really close game. I just don't know if the Falcons can hang on to these powerful Saints.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You go back to that pass interference play, and the main issue, I think, was that the Kansas City defender was not playing the ball. He's more playing the receiver, which is sort of the typical textbook thing that they talk about with pass interference, is that you have to have your head turned around, right? They teach defensive backs in the NFL that you have to have your head turned in order to play the ball. Otherwise, they're going to call it every time. But on Sunday Night Football last week, they didn't, and the Atlanta Falcons ended up losing that game, not directly as a result, but if that was called, you have to imagine the Falcons might have been able to punch it into the end zone. I think this is going to be an interesting game. Again, every division game in the NFL is always fascinating because you never know what quite can happen. The Saints have looked really, really good, and I'm not just saying that because Alvin Kamara is on my fantasy football team. He's helped me out a lot so far this season. But the Saints have been very good at executing offensively. The Falcons, you're sort of looking for them to get into that next gear. I mean, they've got weapons. They've got Kirk Cousins throwing the ball. They've got Bijan Robinson, supposedly a more innovative offensive coach. Drake London looked great on Sunday night against the Chiefs. You're sort of waiting for this Falcons team to unlock their next level on offense. I think they can do that against the Saints, but again, like you said, Riker, New Orleans has been really good so far to start the season.
Yeah, very, very hot team. So let's move into Philly at Tampa Bay. I can't remember who Philly lost to, or won or lost to last week. Who did they play last week?
They beat New Orleans, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
they beat
you're
the
right.
Saints.
Yeah,
yes.
They beat them. It was, 15-12?
Very low-scoring game,
Very
yes.
low-scoring game. So Philly right now, to me, is looking extremely weird. I don't know if you feel the same, but they are not looking very strong, but not looking weak either. They have the depth on the team. They have a good defense. They have a great offense, Jalen Hurts in the back. They have Saquon Barkley, who balled out on week 1, and he's still playing very well too. So I think that we could see Philly keeping this game really close with Tampa. Tampa's a great team too. And Jalen Hurts, man, he just needs to pick up the pace. He didn't play as great last week, but I think that is going to be motivation to play even better this week.
Yeah, you almost wonder how much of the struggles with the Eagles are tied back to the fact that Jason Kelce isn't around anymore. He's been their starting center, their all-pro center, maybe the best center in the history of the NFL for the last decade and a half. He's gone now. The Eagles, I don't think, have been able to fill that void on their offense. Jalen Hurts is clearly, like you said, Riker, there's something not right about Jalen Hurts so far this season. So Philadelphia is really going to need another level from him. This is a team that has been at the top of the NFC for the last few years, but you're not necessarily seeing that same level from the Philadelphia Eagles so far this year. And that, to me, is why the NFC East, I think, could be wide open so far this year, especially with Dallas' struggles so far this season. But you talked about the Eagles definitely looking like a different team. And we'll flip the script to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? This is a Buccaneers team that last week, well, they got flat out embarrassed at home by the Denver Broncos. Baker Mayfield did not look good, a 26-7 loss at home against a Denver team that really is not great, to put it bluntly. So Tampa Bay is really going to have to do some soul searching going into this game. They're going to have to figure out what their identity is as a team. Baker Mayfield played really well in the first 2 games of the season. Can he live up to that level again after, again, not a good performance in week 3?
Yeah. I think Baker needs to find that motivation and really step up his game this week. I think it's going to be a shootout game. I really do, because they're both very powerful offenses with kind of middle-of-the-line defenses. So I guess we'll see what happens there. Let's move on to the Bengals at Panthers game. Last week, we saw Andy Dalton, the only QB in the NFL to throw this season so far, to throw 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in a single game. So that just shows that Bryce Young might not be the answer. I think that Andy Dalton is going to come out swinging again. He's got that position. He's got that edge over Bryce Young, especially from last year, where he was put into a game and played great. Bryce Young, 2 and 16 in the regular season. So he needs to step up his game and really figure out what's going on behind the scenes. But Andy Dalton, man, he is looking great.
Yeah, everything with Bryce Young, too, that you mentioned is Bryce Young coming out of Alabama. There's a little bit of a legacy, so to speak, and I'm not going to let my anti-Alabama bias speak for itself here, but there's a little bit of a history with Alabama quarterbacks not being the most successful in the NFL. You think back to quarterbacks such as A.J. McCarron, or even before that, and I'm dating myself here, think about guys like Brody Croyle back years ago, and Alabama quarterbacks just a lot of times don't succeed in the NFL. Even more recent examples like Mac Jones, perhaps. Bryce Young, I think the issue with Bryce Young is that in college, when you are surrounded by probably the best receiving core in the country and handing the ball off to the best running back in the country, and you're protected by the best offensive line in the country, you're put in a position to win in college. Not that that's a bad thing, but you get these guys that they succeed because they're so surrounded by talent in college. Then they get to the NFL. They're put in a troublesome situation, and playing for Carolina is an impossible situation in 2024, to be completely honest. But Bryce Young, there has not been a single game, at least not to me, where it's looked like, okay, this guy definitely has some flashes, some potential. And I think it's very telling, Riker, that Carolina puts Andy Dalton in for 1 game, and he plays great. And then you look at the flip side for Cincinnati. This is a team that's reeling right now. The Bengals absolutely have to win this game. They are 0-3. The Bengals are a team that's used to slow starts for sure, but this is a team that absolutely has to win this game.
Absolutely, yeah. Joe Burrow, the September Joe Burrow is in full effect right now, so hopefully we can see him flip the script on that one. Moving on to the next game, we have the Jaguars in Texas against Houston. The Jags just came off a brutal loss to the Bills, which makes them 0-3. That was a great game.
Yes,
I was actually at that one. That was really fun. A lot of energy in that stadium. Jacksonville's just not looking good whatsoever. I'm just not. It's not a team that anybody wants to watch. And Trevor Lawrence, he was playing pretty okay last season, but again, they went on they finished the season almost, I think it was 1-8. They finished the season, so that was a pretty rough finish to the season. So he hasn't won a game since October or November of last year. So he's really got to step up his game. And then on the other side, the Texans, Matt, I don't know what you think about C.J. Stroud, but he is the real deal in many, many games.
Yeah, Stroud is definitely a terrific quarterback. This is a really good Houston team. They started 2-0, but they got embarrassed last week, Riker. They went to Minnesota, lost 34-7. This is a battle between not only two divisional opponents, but two divisional opponents who both got flat out embarrassed on the road last week. This is a huge game, really, for both Jacksonville and Houston. I think it's a bigger game for Jacksonville because they're coming in 0-3. But Houston, on the other hand, they started 2-0, took home a bad loss last week. This is going to be an interesting division battle to watch. And then we got one more game left, Riker. The Pittsburgh Steelers going into Indianapolis to face the Colts. The Steelers are 3-0 with Justin Fields. Who would have predicted that? And going into Indianapolis against Anthony Richardson, who's a young quarterback, showing a lot of interesting flashes. What do you think about this matchup, Riker?
I mean, I will say I really do like Anthony Richardson. I think he got the short end of the stick last season with the injury early on. But this season, week 1, that is one big play that he had in, I think it was the second half. It was a deep pass off his back foot into the end zone for a touchdown. I think it was a 60-yard pass. So we could see some potential out of Anthony Richardson, but Justin Fields, like you said, he is, 3-0 with the Steelers. They're not putting up a ton of points. They're not the best wins, but they are wins.
And all those games coming up on Sunday. We're going to take a short break. Thanks for tuning in. This is Sports Hour on WNYF.
This one's for the real ballers and shot callers. The Sisterhood of Women in Tech. They're discovering cures, building apps, and programming the blockchain. They're CEOs, worldwide hustlers who can make it rain. They're tearing down the old boys club and seeing big gains. Because when women in tech come together, you know they make that change.
Every day,
millions of people are connecting.
And even though we're overcoming obstacles,
Watching each other's backs,
And banding together.
we should still make an effort.
We should still make an effort.
to get to know each other,
On a deeper level.
Father,
cosplayer,
Mentor.
Actor.
it's time we take a step forward
it's time we take a step forward.
Come together.
and discover
How accepting our differences
Can make us stronger.
How prepared is your family if a hurricane shows up at your doorstep? Or a flood? Or a blizzard? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking,
Let's go.
you'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes!
Make a plan today.
Most of my family, they never graduated high school or even let alone go to college, so I'm trying to break that barrier. Every day after work, went straight to school, studied hard, and it paid off. I could not have done it alone. I see the future is really bright for me. The high school diploma is just added to the confidence, and now I feel unstoppable.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
And welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm Matt Volz alongside Brock Papke, and now we're going to take a look at last week's NFL games, starting with a pretty big upset, Brock. The Carolina Panthers going to Vegas and beating the Raiders.
I'm as surprised as you, man. Like that, how is that happening? Like, I last week I did like an entire little bit where, like, you know, I was teaching the quarterback football, and I guess he must have like tuned into Sports Hour, and he must have like listened to what a football is, and he must have done all that and just putting that into the game. Like, I'm as surprised as you, Matt. I am surprised. And what is going on with the Raiders? Let's go on with that.
That is just, Carolina is a team that, again, we talked about, Riker and I talked about a few moments ago, that this Carolina team, they bench Bryce Young, who has not looked good so far in his NFL career.
Not.
Andy Dalton comes in and immediately throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against a Raiders team that was fresh off of a huge upset victory in Baltimore against the Ravens. Just a crazy upset every way you think about it. And again, these early season games, Brock, a lot of times are hard to predict, right? Yeah. But this one definitely was a bit of a surprise. We'll move on to our next game, the Miami Dolphins in Seattle against the Seahawks. And Brock, the Dolphins are obviously without Tua Tagovailoa for the foreseeable future. So they start Skylar Thompson. And then he goes down with an injury and didn't look great when he was playing in the game before that as well. So they're forced to start Tim Boyle in the year 2024, and predictably does not go particularly well for the Dolphins. You couldn't expect much from a team on their third-string quarterback. But the Seahawks didn't even have a stellar game, but they certainly did enough to win, Brock.
Yeah, they didn't do well, honestly, man. Well, with the entire organization of the Dolphins crumbling as we speak, and everything with that, I want to give my condolences to Tua first, because, well, you know, it's his fifth, I believe, his fifth concussion overall. I do want to give my condolences to him, but what is going on with that third-string quarterback? I mean, he did his best. Let's just say that. He did his best. And just, it's insanity. It's just really insanity, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, Miami kind of is put into a no-win situation when you're going into a game already with your backup quarterback, and then he gets injured as well. The Seattle Seahawks, again, didn't even play necessarily a stellar game.
Yeah, they did not.
They didn't have to against the Dolphins, though. That's the thing. This Miami team desperately has to find something at quarterback before they can figure anything out offensively. We'll move on to our next game. The Baltimore Ravens go into Dallas and get out to a big lead, but barely hang on to beat the Cowboys 28-25.
Yeah, no, that was, wow. I know the Ravens going into that game, they had like an entire upset last week. And going into that game, I was kind of like, you know, a little worried for their future, especially Lamar and especially Jefferson, all of them combined. I was kind of worried, and then look at this game real quick. It was a game, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Dallas, I mean, they suffered a really embarrassing loss to the Saints 2 weeks ago. Then they're down 28-6 in their home stadium against the Ravens. They put up a good fight, ultimately not enough to get the win. We'll keep moving on to our next game. An NFC West battle, the 49ers are 1-2 after a loss in LA against the Rams in a game where the 49ers led 14-0 at the end of the first quarter. San Francisco, listen, I understand. They're out Christian McCaffrey. They're out a few other playmakers. Jawan Jennings had a heck of a game receiving, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. But this is still a good 49ers team. To blow a 2-touchdown lead and lose to a division rival in a stadium where it was probably 75% San Francisco fans. Just a crazy loss for the 49ers. Maybe a little troublesome, Brock.
It's a little troublesome, man. I remember seeing that entire last kick. It was like, we're about to go into overtime. We're going to, they probably have like a low lead until the kicker exists. And then, into the goal line, ruining their entire career, the 49ers, and then it's just sad. It's very sad to see that end of the game, man.
Some expert kicker analysis from Brock Papke.
Exactly.
Of course, the two of us as Bills fans know a thing or two about kickers, unfortunately missing kicks at the end of games that are particularly costly. Anyways, moving on to our next game, because I really don't want to talk about those missed kicks any more than I ever have to. Our next game, an NFC battle, the Detroit Lions going into Arizona and surviving a tough battle with a Cardinals team that so far this season has been pretty okay.
Yeah, it's been a fine. The Cardinals had like an entire like upset over the previous last game, and then they had a really good battle with Detroit. Like Goff gave like entire touchdown pass, 2 touchdown passes if I remember correctly, and I'm just excited as anybody else just to see them succeed. Like after an entire drought and all that, it's just insanity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Lions, too. I think that a lot of Bills fans, at least I feel this way, a lot of Bills fans sort of share in the Lions' plight in the fact that this is an organization that has not won anything in so many years. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this is how crazy it is. Before last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had won the NFC North more recently than the Detroit Lions. The Buccaneers hadn't been in that division since the late 90s, to give a little bit of perspective. The Lions hadn't won the division since the early 90s. They hadn't won a playoff game since the early 90s. And to see the Lions succeed the way they are, they had a great year last year. They're off to a 2-1 start. Maybe not the same firepower that we expected, but again, it's still early in the season, Brock. There's a lot of time. The Lions have looked really, really solid so far this year. And the Cardinals, too, I think, Brock. Arizona has looked much improved from the last couple of years.
Yes, they have been improved. Something must have been going on in that organization. It's just improving the past few years.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to our Sunday night game. The Kansas City Chiefs narrowly surviving in Atlanta against the Falcons. A close game. And there was a questionable call. Riker and I kind of referenced to it earlier in the show, that the Falcons were faced with a late goal-to-go situation and a pass from Kirk Cousins into the end zone fell incomplete. Probably could have been called pass interference against Kansas City. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be a Kansas City Chiefs NFL is rigged kind of conspiracy theorist. But regardless of who's playing, at least in my view, that's a penalty that's got to be called. The defensive back for the Chiefs is not looking towards the ball. He's not playing the ball. He's playing the receiver. And again, textbook, Brock, that should have been pass interference.
Refs. Let's have a little conversation between me and you. What are you smoking? What are you doing, man? Like, that is an exact pass interference. And I guess I'm going to go into that little route that you try to avoid. But what are you doing? That is an entire pass interference, what you're doing, and then you're just going to say, oh, I think I got a 5 from Andy Reid over here. But no, yeah. Exactly what you're doing. That is rigged. That's what I'm going to go with, man. Nah, man. Just nah.
Well, anyways, before Brock gets even more frustrated with NFL officiating, which is a feeling we all share, we'll move on to the first Monday night game of the week, which was a pretty fun one for a lot of us. The Bills absolutely shellacking the Jacksonville Jaguars 47-10. It reminded me of the Bills playoff game against the Patriots, the wild card game a few years ago. And it made me think of, the scene in Home Alone when Kevin is just sick and tired, or it's a Christmas Story that I'm thinking of, when Ralphie is so sick and tired of getting beat up, and then he just turns around and absolutely just beats the smoke out of his bully. That's what that game felt like. It was a little bit different on Monday night, but the Bills against Jacksonville, every time Buffalo had the ball in the first half, they got in the end zone. Josh Allen executing at an MVP-type level.
Yeah.
Brock, are the Bills the best team in not only the AFC, maybe the NFL right now?
I mean, hey, man, we'll have to see about this incoming season, man. Like, that game alone, that was fantastic. I haven't seen Josh Allen play like in forever like that. Like the last game and like the previous game, that was like fantastic, man. Like all that. And I do want to share a story real quick. So I didn't get to see the game until like halftime, and then Matt over here was talking about DeMar when he did that interception. He literally just said, "Oh, DeMar though." And I was like, "What about DeMar? What about, did we do like another Tua situation? Like, what's going on?" And then I saw the highlight. I was like, oh, okay. You almost gave me a heart attack.
That was a celebratory, oh my gosh, DeMar, that text was. But yeah. I think what you're talking about, Brock, is that Josh Allen is playing a much smarter game now than he was last year under Ken Dorsey. And I think that the message from the Bills coaching staff was maybe a little bit misconstrued when they said that they were going to really try and taper down Josh Allen or limit Josh Allen. I think a lot of people took that to mean that they're going to restrict Josh Allen and not let Josh do what makes him so special as a quarterback. That's not what Joe Brady and McDermott have done. What they've done with Allen is they've given him options where he doesn't have to be the superhero on every single play, which is a smart way to run the offense. Receivers are getting open. Khalil Shakir is a remarkable yards after the catch receiver. They have Dalton Kincaid over the middle of the field. Matt Collins and his beautiful, weird energy. It's just Keon Coleman, of course, even though he didn't play in the first quarter because he was suspended for being late. Oops. He adds a lot of fun, just adds an extra dynamic to this offense that I don't think we saw last year.
No, that's what you said is just perfectly said. Like every thing, like Kincaid and even Cook. Cook has been cooking, pun intended, for the past few games, and I'm really happy for his. Like maybe, just maybe, could be the MVP for this season. You'll never know.
You think so?
I'm kind of reaching a little bit, but I think it could happen.
All right.
It could happen. Maybe cooking at the MVP awards. We'll see about that.
I like the prediction. Well, real quickly, we'll move on to our final game of last week. The other Monday night game, an upset in Cincinnati. The Washington Commanders, in a high-scoring shootout, defeat the Cincinnati Bengals 38-33. Jaden Daniels throwing the first 2 touchdown passes of his NFL career. The Bengals are off to an 0-3 start. Now, Brock, we're used to the Bengals starting slow, but 0-3?
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, that's just... It was an intense game. It was an intense game. It's just like they needed to get something that clicked. And they tried a little bit throughout that game, but the ending score doesn't show, like, you know, everybody knows, like, the ending score, but, like, throughout that game, it was, like good and all that, but they just need to, like, figure, like, that extra push for that entire, like, you know, something that clicks and all that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was an interesting game to watch. The Bengals, again, are going to have to do some soul searching. They're going on the road against a hapless Carolina Panthers team. So we'll see how that works out for next week. And then real quickly, before we sign off for tonight, Brock, final score prediction, Bills at Ravens next Sunday night.
Bills at Ravens? Okay.
And give some analysis too, of course.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say that game kind of scares me a little bit because our little record with the Ravens. It's kind of on and off with the both of them. I do think it's like a tough battle, like given the Bills, like we always have like the oh no type of moment throughout the entire game. But I do want to say, I want to give credit what credit's due. Lamar and Jefferson, they'll probably put up like maybe, I'll give a rough estimate, like 22. And us, we'll try to, given what we are doing right now, I'm going to give that a 34-22. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, with like all that, plus like what they're doing right now, that's my good estimate for right now.
Fantastic. I think this is going to be a really lower scoring game. I think that both of these teams have defenses that are playing pretty well right now. And I think the Bills' defensive line, again, the Ravens' biggest weakness as a team, I would say, is their offensive line.
Yeah.
And so I think the Bills' defensive front, which has been really good so far this year, Brock, I think that they are going to make it an emphasis to get home and get after Lamar, run those contains, and shut down that Ravens rushing offense. For the Bills, I think they're going to really need to simplify things. My final score prediction, a little bit of a lower scoring game. I'm going to say 24-20 Buffalo.
Okay, yeah, I could see that, like it being like very intense and it just being like a low scoring game. But I do agree that like the defense will absolutely destroy Lamar's calves. Like just everything, his running speed and all that, given like what he did for the entire Trevor Lawrence stuff last week. But
fantastic.
That's all I want to say.
Well, that'll do it for tonight's episode of Sports Hour. Thanks for tuning in. This is Brock Papke. I'm Matt Volz. Good night.